Hi, everybody. It's Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and I'm here with Eric Spellmann, who's always a dynamic public speaker and gives us such great information on all kinds of different topics. Today, we're going to talk about how to dominate local search in your city. We want to remind everyone that the New Mexico Small Business Development Center strongly encourages small businesses in New Mexico to take precautions against cyber criminals, ransomware, especially protect your data. We do have those cybersecurity webinars that we have done throughout June available on demand, pre-recorded. So check those out, and I will chat over a link on all the on-demand webinars that we have. I want to remind you that Eric loves to put answers. You put your questions into the Q&A and then he gives you the answers. So remember, throughout the entire webinar, type your questions in the Q&A. With all that, I'm going to pop off and turn it over to Eric.
Okay, here we go. Folks, I hope you're ready, because what I'm going to be talking about today can make one of the biggest differences. If the majority of your audience is local, you need to pay attention, because chances are you're not using all of the free tools to drive local business into your business. So let's jump right into it. What is local search? I mean, really, we have to kind of ask that question first. When someone says local search, what do they actually mean? The easiest way is to realize that when people are looking for business in town, in other words, where you live in that area, larger cities might have a larger area, like Dallas, Fort Worth would include 2 areas that people would be willing to go to. So it's not always just what's in your town. It can also be the area that you're in. And so keep in mind, that's what local is. One of the questions you need to ask is, what percentage of your customers are local? If you've never thought about that, you need to. Now, some of you are going to say 100%. You don't take orders online. You don't sell to people outside of your local area. But most businesses do lend themselves to serving people out of town. Like, some of y'all are going to go, Eric, I have a restaurant. Of course we don't service people out of town. Yes, you do. Hush. People are driving through all the time. And what do they do when they may be coming through your city and they're hungry? They're going to be saying, tell me all the Mexican food places in this town or that town. And if you haven't created your local search correctly, you ain't going to be an option. So don't tell me you don't service people from outside your area. So find out what percentage that is, because I think it's going to be higher than you realize. How do you reach them? How do you reach them now? I mean, all the people local in your business, if you have a business now, how are you reaching those local people? Well, there's probably a number of ways. One might be newspaper, billboards, radio, local TV. And some of you are going to look at me and go, word of mouth. We're so good. We've been around forever. It's all word of mouth. We don't need to advertise. Hush. That's an assumption that will make you less money. Okay. So let's talk about each one of these, and not only what you need to know about them, these traditional marketing methods, you need to know their weaknesses and their strengths. And none of them, well, except for maybe one of them, is going away anytime soon. So let's start with newspapers. Yep, this is the one. This is the one that's dying the fastest. And it is going away. They are going away. I mean, if I were to take a show of hands on how many of y'all still have a subscription to a paper version of the newspaper, I don't think I would see very many hands. Now, I will tell you this, the smaller the town, the higher the subscription rate. But the larger the town, like, Dallas, Fort Worth, or even Amarillo, it's just pretty much going away. And realize that none of the young people are subscribing at all. The demographic, I'll be honest, is going away via attrition. In other words, they're dying. They're getting old and they're dying. So unless you are going after that demographic, funeral homes, then chances are you're not hitting the right demographic, the right group of people that you're trying to sell to. Like I said, obituaries are about it. That's still one of the reasons people go to the newspaper. They say that the top two reasons now that people still get a paper version of the newspaper is for obituaries and comics. That's it. Notice what I didn't mention, local news. That's because they're moving online. A lot of these newspapers realized that they weren't going to make it in the paper version. They realized that they were losing subscribers. And what you need to understand about newspapers is their charge for ads in those newspapers is totally dependent on how many subscribers they have. In other words, how many eyeballs were going to see the ad. So as the subscribers dropped like rocks, they couldn't charge as much for the ads, and therefore they started going out of business. So a lot of these local newspapers, what they did was they went online. Now, some actually created, and then they had two strategies when they did this. Some actually created a subscription, what we call a paywall. In other words, you ain't going to get to read their stories without paying for it, kind of like subscribing to the local newspaper. So the paywall is one instance. Wall Street Journal has that, and it works quite well for them, but they are a national newspaper, okay? And they're very specific in what they do. Some of the larger newspapers do help or do work with that. They do have a paywall, but I'm here to tell you it doesn't work as great as it used to, as the number of subscribers they had for their paper version. So some newspapers actually have a combination free and then paywall, like the New York Times and what's the other one? The USA Today. The New York Times and USA Today, they have you get to look at 4 articles free a month. But then after that, you have to pay them. Now, the amount you pay them is so small, it's not even mentionable. Like $3 a month or something. It's crazy. But there is a paywall, and they give you a taste, but they won't give you the whole ice cream cone. So how do you tie a newspaper back to online? If you're gonna advertise in a newspaper, whether it be through an online paywall, and by the way, there was one other method that newspapers are trying to use, and that's by selling advertising in their online site. And that's actually working better than paywalls are. So you are seeing a lot of, I know the one in Amarillo, the Amarillo Globe News, which I believe is still at amarillo.com, they operate through both a combination paywall and also selling ads on their site. So how do you tie it online? If you're going to tie it online, you need to think about the demographic. And I keep saying that, the type of people that do business with you, their age, their income level, their education, those different pieces that make them a demographic for you. So you got to think about that. And you got to realize that you're not going to hit every demographic, especially with newspaper sites. The young people are not going to be the group you hit at all. So if that's your demographic, forget newspapers altogether. Now, if you are going to do it online, what I recommend is that any ad that you buy on a newspaper, whether it be online or in a paper, have a web address. Have a web address and a phone number. You've got to make it easy for these people. Don't make them hunt for you online. Okay. If they see an ad, it needs to be obvious what your web address is and what your phone number is, because those are going to be the two primary ways people get a hold of you. What about billboards? Well, they're still valuable. I'll be honest. More valuable than a newspaper, I'll say. And they're great in that regard. In fact, you still see billboards up all around. And in fact, we're seeing more and more of those electronic billboards, that change the message. The people who create and sell space on billboards love the electronic ones because basically they can sell more messages and make more money. But if you're going to do this, you must have a quick message. That's the thing. You're not going to have the time of a TV commercial. You're not going to have the time of an ad where people can just sit there and read it. Remember, who's seeing a billboard? Drivers, people who are driving. Okay. So I tell people, if you can't read a message, if you can't get the gist of a message within 2 to 3 seconds, you're going to cause a crash, or they're just going to ignore it altogether. Too many people put too much information on a billboard, or they make the text so small, like they take something like from a magazine ad or a newspaper ad. They say, let's just put this up on a billboard. But then when they do, you can't even read it unless you're standing at the bottom of the billboard. You got to remember, when you're driving, you're watching the road and you see a billboard come up. So what are you going to do? You're going to glance for a couple of seconds. And if it's a good billboard, an easy to read billboard with lots of white space, in other words, space on the billboard without words or pictures, then they're going to get the message. But if you put your full address up there and phone number and a nice little paragraph about how wonderful you are and small pictures and all that, people are going to look up there and go, I can't even read that. Skip it. Billboards are great for small, quick messages. That's it. And you get no demographics. Listen to me. The only demographic you get to claim by using billboard advertising is drivers. That's it. Billboards will target whoever is driving. Now granted, where they are, you might get higher demographics on a certain group. So for instance, billboards placed around your medical complex are going to be seen more by doctors and nurses and patients. Okay. Billboards around an amusement park are going to be seen more by families and people looking for things to do, and even tourists. So sometimes the placement of the billboard is important. I mean, we all know it's kind of important because, we have a restaurant here called the Big Texan Restaurant. Okay, it's that place where you can eat a 72-ounce steak for free if you eat it in 1 hour. It's kind of what we're known for, or what that restaurant's known for. And so people driving down I-40, have heard of it. And so they start putting billboards up miles away from us, but they're all along where? I-40. Because those are the people, and which direction do they have them facing? The people coming towards Amarillo. Okay. And because that's their primary group, tourists. Most people who live in Amarillo do not eat at the Big Texan. Okay. We don't. There's better steak in this town. It's primarily designed for a Texas experience, and they charge accordingly for that experience. So realize that you're primarily going to have what we call the shotgun approach to demographics. You're going to shoot everyone, hoping that some of them were interested in what you had to say. Okay, it does work, but it's a very generalized, well, like I say, a shotgun approach. And it's near impossible to measure results. It really is, because the billboard doesn't count the number of cars going by. It has no idea who's in the car, or what they want or what they don't want. So basically, about the only demographic you're ever going to get from a billboard is the average number of cars that go by it. Okay, that go by that billboard. That's about it. You're not going to see how many actually saw it, how many actually read it, or even know how many picked up the phone and called you from a billboard. Now, there is one way you can get around that. One way, and that is by putting up a very special version of a billboard with a URL that is only available to people on billboards. In other words, if you had a Mexican restaurant and it was called mexicanrestaurant.com, what you might do is go reserve another.com and call it mymexicanrestaurant.com. And then you wouldn't put that anywhere else except on a billboard. You wouldn't put it in your print. You wouldn't put it on a pamphlet, on your business cards, nowhere. And keep in mind, the My Mexican Restaurant points back where? To your main website, mexicanrestaurant.com. And you can measure that. And that way you can kind of tell, okay, they probably saw the billboard because they came here through that.com. So that's one way to do it, kind of a rigged way to do it. Okay. The way you tie a billboard back to online, because keep in mind, our goal is to always send them to our website. Remember that the website is like the wagon wheel, the hub of the wagon wheel, and all the spokes are the different ways people are going to make it to your website. Okay. So your website is the center of the universe from a business standpoint. So the way you tie it to online is you make sure that there's always a web address, always a web address, always a web address, and it's very large and easy to read so people can remember it. If you have a funky long.com that you have to say over and over and people have to write down, people, we've already had this talk. Okay. I'm not saying change your web address, but go get another and repoint it to your site. Okay. Something that's a lot easier to spell, easy to read, and best of all, easy to remember. Radio. Well, let's talk about radio for a second. Radio is also kind of a dwindling thing. It's not going away. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to say that radio is going away. But I will tell you this, depending on whether you're going after FM or AM, it's going to change things, okay? Now, FM is primarily music. There's very few talk radio shows on FM. So FM is all about music, and the way the FM stations make money is how? By selling advertisements between the songs, okay? But if there's too many advertisements, people switch to another station. So the juggling act they all have to do is provide enough music to keep people listening, but not enough ads to keep switching. The advantage of FM over AM, though, is it's a very targetable demographic. In other words, different demographics like different genres of music. You know, there's, hard rock, there's soft rock, there's 80s, there's religious music. You can target a demographic by the FM station, and it is a very targetable demo. AM is all about talk radio, I'll be honest. There's a few who do sports over it, and local sports, you can kind of catch a game here or there. But the majority of successful AM stations are utilizing talk radio. Now, how do I say this carefully? We've already had the talk about politics and how you never, ever, 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 ever mix your politics with your business, okay? Because you want to do business with everybody. And when you start mixing the two, same with religion, when you start mixing those, you automatically start pushing people away from your business. People who don't agree with your way of thinking. And so therefore, they now refuse to do business with you. It's best to leave politics and religion totally out of your advertising altogether, okay? Because you want to work with everybody. You want to sell to everybody. And the second you start adding that in, you're going to be pushing people away. And some of you people go, well, everyone I do business with believes the same way I do. No, they don't. You've just been running your business so long you think that. America's changing, and not everyone believes the same way you do. Don't lose customers simply because you assume they all think the way you do. So that's the danger of advertising on AM radio right now, is it's going to associate you with a certain group of people that other people may not agree with. And also you got to realize there is a threat to both of these, and that is Sirius XM, the national streaming radio, if you will. And more people, especially people in higher income demographics, okay, hear that? Don't even listen to local radio anymore, okay? They don't. They just have Sirius on all the time. And Sirius has a combination of talk radio and music radio. And people have discovered that there's actually less advertising. Why? Because you actually pay to listen to Sirius XM radio. So I'll be honest, if you're going to advertise, Sirius XM could be the way to go. FM would be second, and then AM would be a distant third. I'm just not a fan of advertising on AM radio unless you're going after a very specific political group. And realize everyone has their own music already on their phones. You know, radio was around when you couldn't carry around all your music on a single device. You know, when you hoped you would hear a song and you would call in and request a song, hoping to hear that song. You know, back in my day when I was a kid, I would request a song and then try to record it on a cassette tape so I could have the song. Yeah. I made what we called mixtapes back then from the radio. It was crazy. But now I have over 7,000 songs on my phone, okay, that I've acquired over time. And so if I really want to listen to something that I like, I don't even have to turn on the radio. So realize that those are the threats to radio. The way you tie it online, and you probably guessed this already, is you've got to make sure that your web address is given out in whatever radio ad you do. You've got to tease it. You've got to give them a reason to go to your web address, because keep in mind, most people are just sitting there listening to the radio, doing their own thing. So if you want them to go to a website, you've got to give them a reason or an incentive to go to your website. Maybe it's a coupon. You know, maybe it's a free recipe. Maybe it's I don't know, a how-to video, but you've got to give them a reason. And then you got to say that .com like 7, 8 times for them to even remember it. Because when your ad's over, here come the music, or here comes someone else's ad. And unless you've just said that over and over and over and over, they're going to leave or not even remember you. What about local TV? Well, we all know how local TV works. It's all about the commercials, right? You know, company pays for a commercial. Now that company has to have the commercial made, so there's already a cost involved there. But then they also have to pay the TV station to slot that commercial between shows. And we all know the more popular the show, the more expensive the commercials. And so TV stations have come up with a million different crazy strategies on how to do that, you know, like charging a large amount of money for very popular shows, but then maybe offering free slots when no one's even watching, you know. So you might get 2 or 3 slots during like Big Brother, you know, or Survivor or something like that. But then they might throw in like 3 or 5 or 6 commercials late at night, like at 2 a.m. in the morning, that basically have no value whatsoever, because all they can really do is slot you between another infomercial. The other thing I'm starting to see, and it's kind of interesting, is called a newsmercial. A lot of news stations, in order to make more money, is they're carving out a piece of their local news, and they're kind of mixing news with commercials. There's a lot of questions on whether this is ethical, because people might get the wrong idea. I'll tell you this, I actually did it myself, except I didn't have to pay for it. Our local ABC affiliate for like 10 years hired me once a week to do a small little 3-minute segment during the evening news on technology tips. Now I did it, but I didn't have to pay them a penny because they actually saw it as value. But what it did do for me though was it actually gave me expertise. You see, that's the thing about being on the news. That's why I tell you people all the time, you need to be on the news, because people assume that when a newscaster goes out and gets, a local expert, everyone assumes that they looked at all the people in town and found the one person who knows the most. That ain't how it works. What happened was this local expert they keep going back to, they got on that reporter's golden Rolodex. And the golden Rolodex is one of the most valuable things you will ever learn. And I'm just going to give you the short version real quick. You need to find a reporter or reporters at your local TV station, and they change constantly. So it's going to be a little bit of work. And you're going to take them out to lunch or bring them a pizza or bring over donuts. And because all you really want is a little bit of their time to tell them, hey, if you ever have any stories on this or that, let me know. I'm happy to help. Let me tell you, I got called all the time on technology stories and internet stories and computer virus stories. And I would do short little segments for them. And the reporters liked it because To be honest, most reporters are kind of lazy, and that's why they have a little Rolodex of who to go to when we have this story, who to go to when we have an animal story or a weather story or a medical story or a money story. And they already have their people that they call on. You need to get on that golden Rolodex. It can be the best free advertising you ever get. But these news commercials are different, because these news commercials are kind of where these companies are paying for their tiny little segment. And it's not quite clear when you watch it that it's a paid slot. You follow me? Like during our local news here, I noticed that once a week during the morning news, there was a guy who would come on for maybe 2 minutes during the local news, and he would talk about retirement, stuff like that. And they would bring him on. He was on the local news set talking to a reporter, and they almost made it like it was an interview. But I'll be honest, you can always tell if it's being paid for or not, because at the end, you'll see how to contact that expert. Okay. And of course, infomercials. You're not going to believe this, but I'm a huge fan of infomercials. I really am. If you ever want to learn marketing and you don't have enough money to go to college to learn marketing, watch infomercials, because they're the best marketing on planet Earth. The whole goal of an infomercial is to convince people to take an action, and that action is to pick up the phone, call, and order a product. That's it. It's a simple task. And so everything they do in that infomercial, that 30-minute, that 15-minute, that 1-hour infomercial, everything in it is designed to convince you to call. Oh, I could go on and on, but I ought to make a whole video just on that, because they're brilliant. The copper pans are the ones I love watching. Just want to tell y'all more about that. Well, I'll do that in a later video. The way you tie local TV to online is you could end up doing one of those news commercials I told you about, or you could just do a normal commercial. Okay. And a normal commercial, if you're going to do it, you got to realize that the whole goal of that commercial is to get people to go online. Did you hear me? The goal is you're going to get a little branding, yes, but the whole goal is to get them online. So I would use the commercial time, the 30 seconds, the 15 seconds, whatever you got, to incentivize people to go online. Hey, we're a restaurant and blah, blah, blah. Look at our great food. And hey, if you want a free meal on your birthday, go online right now and click on blah, blah, blah. You have to incentivize that. And it can work. Well, until the DVR. I forgot to mention there are threats to local TV, and that's the DVR. The digital video recorder. Some people call it the PVR, the portable video recorder or whatever. But all it means is, how people can record their shows and then watch them when they get home? A lot of these services, your cable or your satellite, allow you to fast forward through the commercials. And so one of the reasons we don't see commercials doing as well as they used to is because more and more people skip the commercials. They don't just leave it running. They want to watch their show. And keep in mind, when they skip through your commercial, that commercial lost value. And that ain't going away. Word of mouth. Well, once again, you got to understand top of mind awareness. Word of mouth, of course, is when people, recommends your business to someone else. Okay. But you need to understand top of mind awareness. Now, top of mind awareness, and I've mentioned this a few times in other videos. Top of mind awareness is all about the business you think of immediately when the industry comes up. So a good example I always use is pizza. So if we're talking, I say, what do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? And then one of us goes, you want some pizza? And they go, sure, let's just call Domino's. Now, when they say, sure, let's just call Domino's, why did they pick Domino's? Why? It's because Domino's occupied the top of their mind. In other words, in their mind, they've always associated pizza with Domino's. Now, if I were to ask what your top of mind awareness on pizza is, it might be a local joint that has really good homemade pizza, or it could be a national chain or whatever. But my point is, everyone has a top of mind awareness about pizza. And my question to you is this: does your product occupy top of mind awareness for what you do? When people think of what you do they think of you? Or do they think of your competitor or a national competitor? Your goal is to be top of mind awareness, which means people have to hear about you over and over and over again, which is one of the main reasons I say you've got to be in social media and use it regularly. But I'm getting off topic again. You got to realize, however, that word of mouth has evolved. I remember when I was selling websites at one point, trying to convince businesses they needed a website. I would say, you really need a website for people to find you. And some of these older business owners, you know the type. Some of y'all may be the type. They would say, "Oh no, Mr. Spellmann, no, Eric, I don't need no website. Every bit of business I get is word of mouth. It's all referral. We've been here long enough. Everyone knows who we are." I just want to slap them when they say that. I'll be honest. And I'm not into physical violence like that, but I mentally slap them in the face. And I tell them that's not how it works anymore. And they go, "What?" And I say, "Listen, the way it works today is this. My friend comes up to me and says, 'Hey, Eric, do you know a good local Asian food restaurant?' And I'll say, 'Yeah, you need to go over here to Thai Airwan.' Okay. And they go, 'Great.' Now, when they say great, are they immediately going to go to Thai Airwan? No. What are they going to do? They're going to pull out their phone and they're going to Google Thai Airwan. And they're going to look at their menu. They're going to look at the pictures of the food. They're going to read what they got. And they're going to decide whether they want to go in there or not. So you need to realize that word of mouth is no longer just about word of mouth. It's word of mouth augmented. It's word of mouth plus online. And if you do not have a local presence online, then word of mouth is not going to work anymore for you. Because what happens is, you got to realize that word of mouth, everyone is Googling now. Everyone is Googling. They don't just take your word for it anymore. And if your business doesn't come up when they Google whatever your name, even the name of your company is, they're going to think that you're not very good, that you're fly by night, that, ugh. Or if what comes up is a shoddy website that makes you look like, a piece of garbage, then they're not going to come in anyway, even if they got a verbal great review by your best friend. The way it ties online is exactly what I said. And in fact, that's going to be the next thing that we discuss. Review sites. Okay, now review sites are online. You need to understand people who give reviews. And that's going to be one of the major ways that people come into your business or find out about your business. Now, there are two big review sites out there, Google and Yelp. Okay, Google and Yelp. But I'll be honest, it's just Google. It's just Google. Because here's what was happening. Yelp, when it first came out, did well, and they basically hosted all the reviews for all these different companies. But as many businesses know, every once in a while you get a negative review. What Yelp was doing that got it into trouble was you could pay a certain amount of money to Yelp and they would remove your negative posts. Okay? That is highly unethical. And when it was discovered they would do that for you, basically everyone said, "Ugh, I'm not using Yelp again. It's not accurate. All these companies have perfect reviews." Here's the deal. You don't want 5-star. You really don't want a 5-star rating. You really don't. Or if you have a 5-star rating, there needs to be a few bad ones in there, or at least mediocre ones. Because if all you have is 5-star across the board, no one believes it because no one's perfect. Don't get me started on how to handle bad reviews. So I tell people, focus on Google. Okay. Focus on Google, focus on Google. And one of the ways you can do that is when you get a Google review, which is, and by the way, that's how they're beating Yelp, is because when someone types in your company, there's a little box that pops up and it gives information about your company, or maybe shows the hours of it or shows pictures, but it's also where you start to see the reviews, the Google reviews. And when you see those reviews, every once in a while, you'll see a negative review. Well, Google gives people the option, or gives the business owner the ability to respond to that review. So if someone gives you a bad review, respond to it, but respond knowing that other people are going to read your response. Like someone says, I came into Thai Erewhon and my waitress was so rude. I will never eat there again. 1 star. So then what the business owner would do of Thai Erewhon is they would reply and they would say something like this: I'm so sorry for your experience. This is so rare, period. That employee is no longer here, and I would love to bring you in again, and so you can see how it is better. And I'll even pay for one of your meals. Something like that. And so what that shows people is that, yeah, everyone understands people make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But when you show the business owner's response, you're basically seeing that they care that their customers have a good experience. So always respond. Some people are saying, well, how do you respond? Well, you got to claim your business. Step 1, you got to claim your business on Google. And that's all that matters. Did you hear me? That's all that matters. This is one of the most important things you will ever need to do as a small business, and that is claim your business on Google. Now, what does that mean, claim your business? You know how Google, when you search for a business, a local business, Google will pop up a little box either to the right or in the middle and show you the hours of the business and all of that, the actual local businesses. It does that for businesses that have been claimed. Now, a claim means that you've told Google that you're the owner, and you've proved to Google that you're the owner, and Google says, okay, you can now represent that business. And when Google gives you that, and by the way, this costs nothing. When Google gives you that, then you can respond to reviews. So how do you claim it? Step 1, go to google.com/business. It's that simple. That's where you start. Okay. It's a simple address. And some of you are trying to write everything down. Don't feel like you have to write all my points down, because you can get a full copy of this presentation very easily. So go to google.com/business. It's totally free, costs you nothing. Google's not making a dime off this. They're not using this as a way to make money. Next, you need to download the Google My Business app on your iPhone or Android phone. Okay. This is also how you can easily respond. And also, when people try to contact you through the local Google business, this is how you get notified. So if you haven't downloaded the Google My Business app, you need to do that. It'll also help you claim your business too. But if you're like me, if you're in front of a computer all day long, it's probably easier to do google.com/business. Now, what I want to do is show you exactly how this works. When you go, when you go to Google My Business or google.com/business, this is the screen you see. And it makes it very simple. It tells you why you're going to do this. And you can see what it looks like on people's phones. And you got to realize that when you do this Google My Business, most people are going to be looking at their phones when they do it. You can't assume that they're doing it on a computer. The only reason I like to use my computer when I'm filling all this out is because I can type. I'm not as fast typing on the phone. So if you already have a business, then you're going to see up here where it says sign in or manage now. You can sign in. Now, one of the things you got to realize is that in order to have this, you need to have a Google email account, even just a free Google email account. You can use your Google Apps account, like mine, ericspellmann.com or whatever, but you must have an email account. So I often recommend that if you don't have a business email account or something like that, you go ahead and just create a Google email account. And that's how it's going to know who you are and kind of verify who you are. Now realize, like I said, it's completely free, and it's how you're going to manage it. And the app makes it so easy. And it's also where you can put more information about your company. You always wondered how those businesses got their business hours and things like that in there. That's what you do. Now, some of you are going to say, well, Eric, what if we have a chain? What if we have multiple businesses in different cities? Well, guess what? You can manage an unlimited number of businesses under one account, or chain stores or whatever. Okay. So it does make it easy to consolidate. You got to realize that when people Google, and this is really why all this work I'm suggesting to you is worth it, is because it really will be the first impression they have of your company. Because when people Google your company, I hate to tell you this, some of you are going to disagree, but this is going to come up before your own website. Okay. And so, because Google does that on purpose, it wants people to see this. And that's why you need to focus on this and make sure it's accurate and make sure it's representative, because to be honest, this is going to be a bigger first impression than even your website will be. So you're going to go in and add all your essential info. You can put in photos, your logo, and more, and then also show who you are. So you can talk about what's important to you, what nonprofits you contribute to, why they might use you, things like that. And then also, this is how you can connect with customers. This is one of the cool things that most people don't realize. You can create posts and offers, go in there and update it. Where when they see something, if they Google your business, they might see something like this month, you'll get blah, blah, blah. Also, this is how you respond to reviews. Like I said earlier, this is, and especially using the app, which I highly recommend. When people review you, you can respond. And using the app, you can also send and receive direct messages. In other words, you could actually put a link on your Google My Business profile, and someone can click on it and send you a quick question, and your phone will beep if you have the app installed. Also, this is where you can put your FAQs, your frequently asked questions that people always have, about every business. So it just gives you a place to do that. I'm telling you, more and more people use this than you realize. Also, there's different types of businesses you can put on here. For instance, take a look at this one. Bobby's Barbecue and Catering. There's order pickup and order delivery. It's kind of cool. And that's actually would show up in the search results. And you're saying, well, Eric, isn't that kind of bypassing our website? Sure is. And I'm all about it. Because once again, it ain't how you're getting it, it's that you're getting it. Okay. Whether people come to me, whether people call me, whether people direct message me, I don't care where it's coming from, as long as I get it. This gives you another channel to get that information without requiring people to go to your website. You can accept food orders. You can even sell products. You can put your products out there or tie it into a shopping cart service like Shopify, or Instacart or something like that. You can list your products. You can even request quotes. You can make it a lot more interactive than what you're thinking. Up here at the top, under Business Solutions, you'll notice that there are 3 types of businesses that you can kind of see how it works with Google My Business. So for instance, there's restaurants. The way a restaurant would use Google My Business is, notice you'll see it says order pickup and order delivery. You can highlight more, essential info, like whether you have dine-in or pickup or delivery. And you can put pictures of your best stuff. Now, remember, we've already talked about pictures. We don't allow you to take pictures of your own food. Remember, you've got to hire someone. And I'll just be honest, you got to hire a photographer who knows how to take food pictures. Food pictures that actually look good are, they're worth their weight in gold. I remember there was a Mexican restaurant here in Amarillo, a locally owned restaurant with amazing food. It's so good. But if you went online, the pictures they used were awful. They really were. It was almost unappealing. I mean, they had plates of food with, it looked like something that was dried out on the side. There was a pool of grease over here. The lettuce wasn't bright green. It was a tiny bit wilted. And, you know, I'm just saying, you need to get someone who knows how to photograph food, because you can definitely share some of those pictures in your Google area. Think of it almost as a little website. You can also accept online food orders. And with the pandemic being over, during the pandemic, we all learned how to get to go from our favorite restaurants. Okay. So you can either place online orders, or people can order delivery on it. And believe it or not, the pandemic showed everyone how much easier that is. And a lot of people stuck with it, and they will continue to do it. You can also let customers make reservations if you're that kind of place. They make it easy to do that. And then, of course, you can take your reviews and post them to a lot of different places. Retail is another type of business that they have some special accommodations in your Google My Business. So, for instance, you can leave what your hours are, and people can instantly get a map to where you're located. They can actually see products. Okay. And the way you get your products in there, there's a lot of different ways, but the easiest is to simply tie it into your existing shopping cart if you are selling stuff online where you'll ship it to them. And like I said, the two biggest ones out there that work with this are Shopify and Instacart. And it works really well. And when you update one, it updates your Google for you. So it's kind of a quick way to get people into your store without having them come through the front door. Also, it kind of gives you a place where you can talk about kind of what kind of things people can receive, but also people can do direct messaging. They can call you. Like I said, they make it very easy. The other type of business is services. And this is where, for instance, like insurance or something like that. We're not talking products that you ship to people. So they have options like request a quote. You can highlight what you do under your list of services. I mean, you can create a whole menu of services, just like a restaurant would create a menu of food. Now, some people ask me at this time, they come up and say, Eric, tell me the truth. If I fill all this out really well, does it help my search? Does it help my business show up better in search? Yeah, it does, because the information you put in here is the official information about your company, not just what your website claims. Google trusts that more than your website, believe it or not. And so by filling this out completely, you're going to find that your company shows up better than other companies in a normal organic search. Google might deny that and say, no, we judge everything the same. But keep in mind, Google wants to encourage people to use the Google My Business. And so I've seen it. I've seen businesses go from page 5 on Google results all the way up to page 1, simply by filling out their business profile. You can also credential yourself, because services is all about what you do. So you can include your reviews or whichever reviews you want to in that. Post certifications. Like I said, get quotes. Oh, this is one of my favorites. You can even schedule. So like if what you sell, you're always asking people, well, when do you want us to come out? You can create a schedule book here and actually take appointments. And it works quite well. This is the direct messaging I was talking about, where your customers on their phones could just click send a direct message to you. And if you have the Google My Business app, you'll be able to respond in kind. Okay. Some of the resources, there's a lot of other things where you can take this further. I'm not going to go into them because I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Because there's a lot of ways you can just grow this a lot. I actually know people who have filled this out completely, and they pretty much just use this as their website. I kid you not, because it does everything they need, and they get more traffic here than their website. So here's the deal. The question is, how does the actual process work? Okay. How do you claim your business? Well, step one is you're going to need an email account, a Google email account. So if I click manage now, like, yeah, I want to do this. First thing it's going to do is ask me to sign in. And if I don't have a Google email address, I need to create one. Now, this can be an address that you only use for this purpose, and that's fine. It's free. It costs you nothing. It's not that people are going to see this address, but Google needs an account, and it needs an account that you're going to check so that it can send information to you about your account. So step one is to create that email. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to have you find your business on a map, or it's going to try to locate what business you're talking about. And this also connects it to the map, the Google Maps, whichever one uses. And then, listen, it's got to verify that you are the owner of the business or someone who can make this call, someone who has the credentials to respond on behalf of your company to the reviews. Now, how does Google verify that? Well, there's one of two ways. One way, and if you're lucky, this happens, it will call the business phone number that it already knows about your company and give a little 4 or 5 digit code. And then you, within 5 minutes, you enter that 4 or 5 digit code, boom, that verifies that you own the business or that you run the business. The other way, it takes longer, and it's a postcard. It's a postcard that gets sent with the same 5 digit code on it, and it gets sent to the address that Google already knows. And once you get that, you'll have 2 weeks to get that code in, claim your business. But between you and me, there's an easier way than both of those, because trust me, if you do the phone call method, usually the person who answers the main line at your company doesn't even know this is happening. And so when they hear it, they hang up thinking that it's, someone asking for your car warranty. And the mail, trust me, that little postcard that Google sends out looks a lot like junk mail. So a lot of it gets thrown out before you even see it. So let me tell you the secret to verifying your business. There's a group of people on this planet that Google trusts more than just about any other in deciding who a business owner is. And believe it or not, it's the small business development centers, the SBDCs. In fact, the people sponsoring this video. So one of the easiest ways to get verified, or even go through this whole process, is to call Leslie or call Adrian or call someone, your local SBDC person. Set an appointment with them and say, I just need to verify my business on Google. And they'll know what you're talking about, because these SBDC counselors, they have a special app that Google gave them. You don't get this app. They have a special app. And using this app, they can instantly verify that you are the owner of the business. Instantly. I've actually had to use them a few times to do my own because it's so much faster. So just realize that's, if you've ever needed a reason to schedule a time to talk to one of these amazing SBDC counselors, this is it. Oh, by the way, they'll also keep you from making a lot of serious mistakes. I swear, my company would not exist today if it weren't for my SBDC counselors keeping me from going off the cliff. Okay. Just because you're good at your business doesn't mean you know how to run a business. Okay. So that's basically what's involved. Once you get your business claimed and you fill out all the information in it, well, then it just starts working for you. And trust me, the more information you put in, the more you're going to show up in search. And that's also how you get above your competition in local search. You simply have more information than they do. It's that simple. Okay, Leslie.
Well, it really is so easy once you put that app on your phone, that Google My Business app, because it looks like a little blue house on there. And so you put that app on, and then if you have you have a grand opening going on, you have a special, you can add those pictures and you can update your hours of operation instantly. So it's really nice, and they make it really easy to control what's, and I guess you can't put, there's still other pictures that are going to go up there, but you can really control what your stuff looks like. So it's a great tool. And I really am glad that you gave this talk today, because Eric, you're absolutely right. It's free, easy, and it helps your business. And
It does. It
yes,
does. You're going to get traffic to your business you never would have gotten had you not done this. Local
and
traffic.
I know, local traffic. And I did make sure we do have that available, so we can help you with any of the steps that you need on getting your business up on Google, which of course, like Eric says, Google's the king daddy of them all. So
They
let's let's make sure that everyone gets that taken care of, free, easy, and it's kind of fun once you start playing with it and taking pictures of your crew and what's going on in your business. I do want to do some quick updates real quick. This is July, and we have over 30 webinars coming up this month. Check out nmsbdc.org for all the latest. Watch all the ones pre-recorded on demand, and visit our YouTube channel. So Eric, last thoughts before we pop off.
Just go to google.com/business and just start doing it. I'm telling you, this will make them, they explain it very easy. It's very easy to do.
Yeah.
If you want to do it faster, call a SBDC counselor and get an appointment.
Yes, get up online with Google. So that's it for today, guys. If you don't have any more questions, we will see you next time with Eric Spellmann. You guys have a great day. Bye. Thank you from Dawn. Thank you, Dawn, for attending.